safest family on the block, where knowledge is power. I'm your host, Jason Brick, and with me today is Rita R. Robison. Hello, Rita.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, Rita is a consumer and personal finance journalist. As a blogger, she focuses on helping consumers make smart money choices, and she's worked as a reporter and a columnist for newspapers all across the West. When she worked for the Anchorage Times, she was Bud, short for Ombudsman, and answered daily questions from readers. She has a book forthcoming, Follow the Money, My Life as a Financial Journalist. And what does that have to do with family safety, you might ask? And we're going to spend the next hour with the answer to that question, mostly around Rita is at ground zero for consumer reports on product safety, on news reports about toys and other objects in the house that seem innocuous but are actually fairly dangerous for kids. And we're going to talk about those today. So Rita, thank you again for joining us. And you wanted to start with just some general recommendations about product safety, about recalls, and some things along that line?
Yes, well, when I started out being a consumer journalist, it was in the 1970s. And the Consumer Product Safety Commission was created in 1972. So back then it was before the internet. So the way that the Consumer Product Safety Commission notified people about recalls was for news releases. So I got a news release, I got hundreds of them, but this was just starting. And one was on shop lights. So my husband had just purchased a shop light, which was killing people. So I went out and I looked at the shop light, and it was the one being recalled. So I took it back to the store and got my money back. But because I was a consumer journalist, getting the recall notices, that's how I was informed about it. So
and that was killing people. Was it starting fires, or was it electrocuting people?
It was electrocuting people.
Oh, wow.
So I thought that was a pretty good save.
Yeah. Okay.
So that brought home to me strongly the importance of knowing about recalls. So back then, what the Consumer Product Safety Commission did was send out the news releases. They wanted the newspapers to, print the list, because millions of products are recalled every year. So back then, a few of the larger newspapers would put in, maybe this many column inches a week, but a lot of them didn't, because, the news hole is limited. What people don't realize about newspapers is they sell the ads, they put all the ads in, and then what's left over is the news hole. Well, because newspapers are shrinking so much, we don't get that information in the newspapers these days. And they will print stories and have them on television about huge, huge recalls. But millions of products are recalled every year, and only 10% of them are repaired or replaced. So you can see there are millions and millions and millions of products out there that are recalled that are still in homes. One example is the IKEA dresser. And we'll talk more about that later. But just as an example, one certain model of IKEA dresser, 15 million were recalled. Only 400,000 were returned or repaired. So consumers, you need to be aware of recalls.
It sounds like the first line of defense for any parent who's concerned about a product they might be bringing into their home would be to get that information. It's no longer through the newspapers, but we go straight to the internet probably. Is there a website or something?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. So, but you also need to be aware as parents that there are products in the home that have been recalled that you haven't known about, old recalls. So it's the new recalls, and you also need to be aware of old recalls. So what parents need to do for new recalls is they need to weekly go to the website of the Consumer Product Safety Commission, because that's where they'll find recalls for that agency.
Okay. And we'll put a link to that in the notes.
Okay.
For our viewers.
Right. Then another place to go is www.recalls.gov. And this lists the recalls from the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Also, automobile, food, and drug recalls. So you'll see them all on that website. And also, parents need to be aware of, for car seats, they're not regulated by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. They're regulated by the National Highway Transportation Administration. So then guns, you know, I heard this story on NPR about a teenager who accidentally killed his brother with a rifle, and he went to jail and then prison. And finally, he told his dad that the gun went off, you know, without him touching the trigger. So I looked up recalls for guns, because I know you have someone else covering guns. But what I learned was that only the manufacturer in the United States can recall a gun. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
There's no agency allowed because of Second Amendment concerns to recall guns. So that's another thing that parents need to know. You know, when they're checking through their home, you know, to see what might have been recalled already, you know, if you've got a gun, then look it up.
I can't imagine many things more dangerous than a faulty firearm.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, beyond the recalls, which is important, and thank you again for the resources available to that, we wanted to talk a bit today about some products that, even if they're working properly, are still quite dangerous in the home. And some of these aren't terribly surprising, but other ones came as a huge surprise to me, and probably will to some of our listeners. You sent me a great list before we recorded, and it started with potential for accidental poisoning. Can you talk a bit about what to watch out for there?
Well, that was down on my list, but after making the list, I decided to put it up at the top and talk about it first, because 2 children die a day from accidental poisoning. Hundreds, you know, go to the ER. So what parents need to do is be aware of this, and they need to lock up their poisons. They need to lock up their prescription drugs. They need to lock up their cleaners and their dishwashing detergent. And do not buy Tide Pods, because Tide Pods look like candy. And so you wanted to focus on toddlers. So, you know, toddlers are very inquisitive. So they're going around looking in the cupboards. Oh, and another tip that I've written about is, don't take a hazardous product and put it in some other kind of container. Like, don't take bleach and put it in a soda bottle, because again, kids are looking around and they're inquisitive. And
a friend of mine has a story related to that. It's humorous, not tragic, but for some reason had put nicotine gum in an Aleve bottle for whatever reason, and then blisteringly hungover one morning, poured that bottle into his hand and swallowed 3 pieces of nicotine gum while hungover, and was fire hose sick for about an hour. And it's a more humorous illustration of what you're talking about, but that proper labeling, especially, you know, the youngest kids can't read, but
it's a good thing to tell, because a child could, you know, a child could very easily, you know, get into that, and it could be a disaster. So what people need to do is they need to put the number of the Poison Control Center on their refrigerator. And that's 1-800-222-1222. So you could put that in the notes too.
Yes, Poison Control Center. Mr. Yuck, over in our neck of the woods, the little Mr. Yuck sticker
Yeah.
that we used to have.
So it's very important for parents to, I was shocked to read, getting ready for this, that two children die a day. I mean, that's terrible. So another reason to lock up your prescription drugs is your teens and older kids could get into your medication. So even after they're toddlers, you should be locking up the drugs. So I'll tell a story on myself, look how educated I am. So each one of my two daughters got into something they shouldn't have. And one was, we had just come back from a camping trip and we had insect repellent, and it was in a small glass kind of container. And my oldest daughter got into that, and I had to take her to the ER. And then my youngest daughter, she was a toddler, and I had everything locked up, but the Bonami, which is a less toxic kind of cleaner, so I wasn't being careful enough. So what happened was, we were eating dried apricots at the time. So my older daughter took the Bonami and she sprinkled it on the dried apricot. And then, so the young one.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So the ironic thing is, we were just getting ready to go to the doctor. And so instead of whatever I was going to take her for, she had to have her stomach pumped out.
Oh, wow. And it is that hand-to-mouth pipeline that toddlers have.
Oh,
that
yes.
I feel like we have to be especially wary of.
Yeah.
And the good news is, you can lock our things up, and there's some really ingeniously engineered products now to help make those locks work and be more effective than the little spring thing on the cabinet that we had when we were growing up.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things we can do about it, and the most important thing, of course, is to know about it and take informed action.
Yeah. Well, if two kids, parents should just think in their mind, 2 kids die a day. Not going to be my toddler.
That's right. Now, the next one on the list that you sent over was water, which is surprisingly dangerous, unfortunately.
Well, about 800 kids drowned each year, and more than half of them are under age 5. So for the toddler group that we're talking about today, this is very important. So my recommendation is to watch toddlers all the time. And if you own a swimming pool, put a fence around it and put a lock on that fence. So I had read that a story about triplets that had drowned, and they were, the nanny was in charge, and somehow the sliding glass door had been left unlatched. So the kids got the sliding glass door open, the dog ran out and jumped in the pool, and the 3 little kids ran after the dog into the pool, and they all drowned.
Oh, man. Wherever you live, some jurisdictions have very, very strict laws and building codes around swimming pools. Others are more lax, but wherever you live, wherever you bought the pool, whoever installed the pool, or just whoever's nearby, if you bought the home with the pool intact already or in place already, they will know the names and the phone numbers of people who can set you up with the pool security you need. Another person we interviewed on the show was talking about how the people will come out and ask you, they'll assess who's in the home, how old are the kids, are there elderly members of the family who can't swim, are you all a bunch of people who can't swim, or is this the Michael Phelps residence, and give you a recommendation based on the realities of your home at that time. And that can be very helpful. Although the other thing to keep an eye on, I understand, and I'd love for you to talk to this a bit, is swimming pools aren't the only risk. Like a bucket with an inch of rainwater in it apparently can be just as dangerous.
Well, before we go on to that, let's talk about learning to swim. Teach your kids to swim. Learn to swim yourself. So when I was looking for this story about the triplets to make sure that it was something that actually happened, I read one of the latest things, one of the latest tragedies is a family bought a new home. The 8-year-old got into the pool, got into trouble. The grandfather jumped in to save her. He didn't know how to swim. He got in trouble. The mom jumped in the pool to try to save her father and the child, and all 3 of them drowned.
Oh, man.
None of them knew how to swim. So again, if you buy this home with the pool, you know, put the fence up and put the lock on it.
And it probably would not be a bad idea to have a drowning drill the way that a household has a fire drill, where you've got somebody who's there, a grandfather who sees his grandson drowning, obviously wants to jump and help and does the exact wrong thing. Where if I don't want to victim blame here, but if the family had instead had a broom or a pole or one of those lifeguard poles right there and had practiced in its use and had drilled once or twice, that could have been resulted in no fatalities at all. And so if we have a pool or other dangerous thing at the house, the idea of coming up with a plan for if something goes wrong and then practicing that plan frequently enough that everybody knows what to do in the case of the emergency, that might go a long way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So pools are dangerous. So I like the assessment that you had of, you know, when you move into the house and the pool is there, you know, get something figured out. Oh, and then another thing I wanted to add is the latest recommendation for this topic is a child who is in water needs to have an adult assigned to watch that child. And the latest recommendation is the person should not be on their cell phone. Because we're so into being on the cell phone now. I can see where it would be easy to be at the beach or, you know, at the pool, and you're supposed to be watching the kids, and instead, you know, you're, you know, so I think that's a good recommendation. So then we're talking about toddlers, and that brings up the drowning in the bucket or the toilet. So little kids are, well, they're curious for one thing, but also they're unsteady on their feet. So the toddler can be coming up and here's the bucket of water or the toilet, and they can fall right in there and drown. A kid can drown in an inch of water. So the recommendation is, you know, if you're going to have buckets around in your yard, you know, to turn them upside down because they can even collect rainwater. So now we also need to talk about drains because they're an issue in terms of safety. You have to make sure that you've got the latest equipment because the flat drains are dangerous because the water in the pool is circulating, and so there's suction. So, and this was one of the most horrible things I read, is that a child, because they're lightweight, you know, can become trapped on the drain, and it can suck out their intestines. So it's a very dangerous thing. And due to a new safety standard that was passed, fewer children are dying in this manner. But it's another thing that you should be aware of, you know, if you've got a pool.
Wow. And I think that you can, if you have an older pool, there's devices you can retrofit. It's basically a cage over the pump that keeps people far enough away to be out of harm's way. Whether it's that horrific removal of the intestines or just enough suction to keep a small child from swimming to the surface.
Oh yeah, it can cause drowning.
Yeah,
and the pieces of the bathing suit can get caught, and sometimes the drains get cracked, and you know, a piece of the bathing suit can be you know, stuck in there, or a piece of jewelry. So do not wear any jewelry when you go swimming. So you know, that's another thing that to watch out for.
Wow. Now, the next one, I think a lot of parents have a general idea of poisoning and drowning as dangerous, even if they don't have good specific information like we've been talking about. But the first one on your list that was a bit surprising to me is tipovers and how dangerous and frequent these injuries and deaths are.
Yes, 2 deaths a month. And so this is a place where, okay, a thing I wanted to mention that I forgot in the beginning, in the introduction, but it just fits in really nicely here now. And that is, consumers think that because something is on the market and is being sold, it's safe. And that's just not true. New products are introduced all the time. And so, people may think their dressers are safe, but this is a big reoccurring problem. IKEA has recalled millions and millions of dressers. And so there's a new video that came out in about the last month or so about twins. There was a nanny cam, so this was all recorded, and the parents shared it so that people could see this problem. So here were the 2 twins napping in the crib. They woke up from the nap quietly, crawled out of their crib, walked over to the dresser. They pulled out the bottom drawer of the dresser. They both got in the bottom drawer of the dresser. Boom, the dresser tips over on them and they start screaming. So then the parents run in and see what happened, and it was recorded so they can share this story with people. So
and to clarify, a tip over is exactly what it sounds like, where a piece of heavy furniture tips over onto a child, crushing or trapping or potentially killing them, right?
Right, and we know more about dressers because millions and millions have been recalled in the last several years, but TV tip overs is also a problem. So it's heavy furniture.
Yeah.
So,
and the good news about tip overs, though, is this is one of the ones that is very easily preventable with a $2 L brace from Home Depot and knowing how to find your wall stud, right?
yeah.
And just 10 minutes and $2, and you have prevented that for each of the items in your house.
Right, and IKEA will send a kit with the the proper things in it to attach it to the wall, or you can return recent dressers for a refund. However, their website does say that due to COVID-19, they're not doing some of the repairs in some areas because some stores have been closed.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right. Attach those dressers to the wall. And this also brings up the topic of standards. So the Consumer Reports and KID, it's an organization, Kids in Danger. They don't think that the standards are strong enough. They think that they were based on a certain weight of a child, and they don't think that the standards are realistic in terms of how much a child weighs and what children might do with a dresser. So this video with the 2 twins shows exactly what Consumer Reports and KID are talking about, because 2 kids getting in the bottom drawer. So I looked on the IKEA website, and another tip they had is don't put heavy items in the top drawers.
Well, that makes sense. I remember working in an office where, for whatever reason, the top file drawer was full and the bottom file drawer was mostly empty. And every damn time it would tip over and you have to catch it with your hand before it.
Oh boy, that's really dangerous.
Every time. And although that seems kind of obvious, that's, you're setting up your bookcase to be attractive and make the kids, especially in a kids friendly household where you're putting the books you really value up top where the toddler's not going to grab it and put crayons on it, and you're putting maybe one of those fabric drawers full of kids' toys down where the kid can reach, you've completely accidentally created exactly that hazard you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, the best thing to do is attach it to the wall, but it was interesting to see that on their website.
Wow. And then the next one on the list is very similar, where it's window coverings and the risk that they cause, a very innocuous thing that we usually don't think about once we've finished purchasing and installing them. But they also pose a hazard?
Oh, yeah, because they go like this, so the kid can get in there and then fall, and they strangle.
Oh, wow.
So it's extremely dangerous. So what's happened in terms of regulations is as of 2018, you can no longer buy blinds in the store with the long cords.
Okay.
However, it doesn't apply to custom-made blinds. So,
or to the blinds that are in most apartments people move into, or to the blinds that are left over in my kitchen from 2007.
yeah.
So and what can we do? Is it as simple as just putting a cleat on the wall and making sure that that cord's out of reach?
Well, what the Consumer Product Safety Commission recommends is that you replace them.
Okay, replace them outright.
Yeah, just replace them. Because there have been problems with people anchoring, those, you've seen the thing that anchors cords, but they haven't been done correctly, or there's some kind of problem with it. So, and also this brings up the issue of cords in the nursery. So one recommendation is, to do get a safety checklist of the nursery, because another strangling was caused by a nanny cam. It was put too close to the crib and the child strangled on the cord.
Oh, wow.
So beware, look in your nursery and look for other cords, because that's we're talking about things that you can prevent, and that's a prevention.
Especially now that we all live in the future, a wireless nanny cam is under $100, I think under $70 right now. So we can avoid that possibility entirely.
Yeah, so about 10 deaths a year occur from this issue. And it's extremely difficult to get, I tried to get my daughter, who has twins, to do this, and she just didn't think it was an issue. So finally I just cut them myself. And I did get in trouble, but it's a concern.
And as a parent, if I'm buying new window coverings, I'm assuming the vertical blinds with the little loop that's up high is probably pretty safe.
Yeah.
And just how about just regular hanging curtains?
The short.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about just regular hanging curtains? Are those reasonably safe?
Yeah.
Okay. But maybe avoid those window treatments that kind of form that U shape there. That sounds like what you were talking about, where a kid could get caught.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Now that was another one that surprised me. Now the next one on your list is frankly ironic, but strollers, which should be, I would think, as just an amateur, a stroller should be safe.
Well, in this country, making safer products costs money. And so the corporations are lobbying all the time, against stricter safety standards of all kinds. And so one recommendation is to be careful of any kind of new products for kids that come on the market. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about babies, because and sleep, you know, inclined sleepers and other things. We're going to talk about that at another time. But consumers should just be aware that there are unsafe products in the home. So my recommendation is, if you've got a kid and you've got a stroller, look it up to see if it's been recalled. Because I've written about strollers that when you fold them up, they cut the fingers off of adults and kids. So
wow.
It's just another thing to be aware of, that strollers have been recalled. So look up your stroller and make sure that, you know, it hasn't been recalled. So a couple weeks ago, I wrote about a stroller for twins. And the problem was that the spacing between the activity tray and the seat wasn't right. So it posed an entrapment hazard.
Oh, no. Okay.
So that's why parents need to every week look at this list, because, you know, strollers are more safe than they used to be. But since most people don't know about recalls, you might have one of those strollers that when you fold it up, it's cutting off the fingers.
And I imagine, it's been a while since I was in the market for a stroller, but what I've noticed is the engineers have gotten into the stroller game. So strollers used to be a thing you put a baby in and rolled around, but you can get these incredibly ornate versions now that have ATV wheels, and they fold with the push of a button, and a stereo and a battleship, and just all kinds of bells and whistles to make it really cool and really convenient. But it feels like for each one of those additions, you're making the system more complex, and the possibility of a danger being inadvertently added to that stroller more likely. Do you have a sense for if that's something to keep an eye on, or?
Well, that's exactly what I was talking about in terms of new products being introduced. You just don't know. And you know, as a parent, you've just got to be aware of this problem with recalls, that there are dangerous products in the home. And you know, don't buy secondhand stuff, because you could find something there that's being sold that's been recalled.
Wow. And it sounds also that maybe when the Baby Master 2001 stroller comes out, you might be better off with the Baby Master 2000 until the 2001's been out enough for recalls to come in, for Consumer Reports to get a look at it. Would that be smart if you can find the older model from a reputable dealer? Or
yeah, you should be able to just find a regular stroller, and again, type into Google the name of the stroller that you want to get. I mean, you can even do it in the store. Type in the stroller. Nice. Well, it's unlikely that one in the store is, usually the stores remove them. You know, the larger stores get the recall notices, so then they remove them. So it's unlikely that in the store you would see one that's been recalled, but the one you have at home, you should type in the name of it and recall to see if it's been recalled.
Or the hand-me-down gift from a cousin.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Well, the next one on our list here is magnets, which disappoints me as a huge nerd. Magnet toys are so damn cool, but they pose a hazard.
Yes, because kids are curious. Little kids, the toddlers, you know, they're putting everything in their mouth. If you've got older kids or even adults, because some of these magnet things adults like.
Oh yeah.
So you have to be really careful, because kids are putting things in their mouth. So if they swallow one magnet, that's not much of a problem. But if they swallow two magnets, then the magnets go together and they can tear holes in the stomach and the intestine. So they're very dangerous. So, you know, there was a lot of publicity about this, and there was a recommendation to ban them, but there was a court decision and it allowed manufacturers to develop their own voluntary standards. And this includes warnings and packaging changes in some cases. So again, it's up to parents, to be aware. And this doesn't just apply to toddlers, it also applies to older kids, because there was a kid, I think about 8, and he got the magnets and put them up to his nose because he was saying, oh, these look like piercings, and he ingested them. So
and there we are.
Yeah, and had to go to the hospital.
And that's also an important point that I've been gathering, that there's a certain range there where even the kid, if they don't stuff it up their nose or whatnot, the kid is old enough to understand how to properly play with this toy, but not necessarily old enough to reliably clean up their toys and not leave them where the toddler in the house will find them. And so there's another point where we need to be extra special vigilant with toys like this, especially.
Yeah.
Because I want my 10-year-old to have science toys. But
it's a big problem when you have a toddler and then you have an older kid.
Yeah. So before we move on, Rita, I mentioned in your bio that your forthcoming book, Follow the Money, My Life as a Financial Journalist, will be coming out ere too long. And would you tell us a little bit about this? What's the book about? Why did you write it? What's going on?
Well, I've been very lucky as a consumer and personal finance journalist to work for 5 different newspapers. So I've accumulated a lot of knowledge. As you can see, we've been talking about child safety, and I've written hundreds of articles on this topic. So and consumers, they just don't do a good job about being informed and taking an interest in things that are important to them as consumers. So I thought I would write this book. I go through the different things I learned as I worked for 5 different print newspapers. And you mentioned Tell It to Bud, which I put in my bio because that was my favorite job. People would write in and ask me questions about consumer issues, and then I'd answer them. So I just want to use it as a way to educate consumers that they need to, instead of being, they work for a corporation, so then they're more interested in the corporate world than they are in their own consumer interests. So if consumers would band together, they would have a lot of power in the marketplace. If they formed buying clubs, if they regularly did boycotts, they would be a powerful voice. But they don't. So that's one reason I got into consumer journalism. That's why I do this work, which has been my life's passion. So now I'm a blogger, which is like having my own newspaper. So I've written more than 6,000 articles now in over 10 years, and I have lots of good information to share on many consumer topics.
And what is the website where folks can find you? What's it called?
Oh, my
your blog. Where can they find you?
Well, my blog is called, I have 2 different ones. My national blog is the Survive and Thrive Boomer Guide, and I also have a reader blog on the Seattle Post-Intelligencer website called The Boomer Consumer.
And we'll put links to those in the show notes as well. I had a chance to take a look at some of it, and it is really impressive stuff, and all across the board, everything from how to save some money to boost up your 401k to how to get raccoons out of your backyard and everything in between. So it's definitely worth checking out. Now, the next one on our list here, Rita, was toy-related injuries, which is a pretty broad topic, but I mean, there are some toys. I mean, lawn darts aren't a thing anymore, down to toys that are relatively innocuous but have small, swallowable parts. What can we as parents do to kind of balance that line between having fun things available for our kids and avoiding the not fun trip to the emergency room?
Well, one of the main points is read on the label the age recommendations, because you know, my daughter, when she was 18 months old, could recite nursery rhymes, and she was very smart. But the age recommendations are, you need to follow those, because you know, it's about small parts, and if it says small parts not suitable for children under age 3, you know, you should follow those recommendations. And just because your kid is bright, don't get them older toys. And you know, there are millions and millions and millions of toys on the market, and you also need to be following the recalls to see if any of the new, you know, anything you have is coming out in the recalls. And also you need to determine if anything that you have has been recalled. So a general recommendation is to avoid cheap metal or painted jewelry for children, because those items might have lead. And of course, kids are putting things in their mouth. So
now, is that still a concern? Or is that older stuff? It's still not a concern?
Because just think about it. Just think about how much of the manufacturing stuff is done overseas. You know, we've made the lead standard here. Stuff is being made in China, and maybe there's a dealer in China who's not following the recommendations. And in relation to lead, what I learned was that, you know, it's really, even a small amount of exposure is dangerous. You know, I thought you had to live in you know, the kid had to be eating the lead paint, you know, chips for years. But, you know, the research shows that even a small amount of lead can be damaging to the kid's nervous system. So another thing that parents need to do before the birthday shopping or before the Christmas shopping is they need to be aware that there are some groups that are studying this all the time and informing consumers. And one is US PIRG, P-I-R-G, stands for Public Interest Research Group. And they do a list every year of dangerous toys. So, and like I said, it's very hard to keep track of all this because so many new ones are coming in, but they're testing them and doing this annual report. In fact, I hadn't thought of it before, but you know, parents could go and look at the latest. They could go to the US PIRG website and look at the, you know, the last several years of dangerous toys to make sure that they don't have any of those. There's another group called WATCH, W-A-T-C-H, and that stands for World Against Toys Causing Harm. You can also check their website. And then KID, which I've mentioned before, they have information. Kids in Danger, they have information on toy safety.
Wow. And these dangers aren't just things like swallowing or maybe getting something wrapped around your hand, but you have with electronic toys, possibility of fire or acid burns from cheap batteries. When I checked out those websites when you recommended them, the sources of potential danger was much wider than I had imagined and surprising to me. So we do recommend that you check out those sites and get a sense for what's being recalled and also the different potential hazards that we're dealing with here, because I know it surprised me how easily certain kinds of toys can cause a level of harm that I just simply had not anticipated. And our next one here is hot cars. You know, it's July here as we're recording, and so we've already seen the news report about something going wrong, but it's always bears repeating. Tell us about hot cars.
Well,
We're not talking stolen cars.
No, this is just such a sad topic, and every time I read about it, it just makes me ill. And so about 50 kids a year die in hot cars, and half of them, what happens is the parent who usually takes the kid to daycare is unavailable, so the other parent takes the kid to daycare. And what happens is the parent gets out of the car, forgets the kid is in the car, and goes into the workplace. And the kid dies in the hot car. So what's recommended is every time you put a kid in the car seat, to take a blanket or a stuffed toy or something and put it in the front seat. And then that will be a reminder to you that you've got the kid in the car. And so one report was that the guy was at work. He had his keys with the fob, and he heard this noise from his car, which might have been the kid moving around or something. So then he would just take the fob and turn off the noise, not realizing that the kid was in the car.
And that's contrary to, when I hear about a news article like that, I always imagine running into the store to get something and not realizing how quickly the car can heat up to dangerous levels. This is a scenario that had frankly never occurred to me, but I can completely see that. I remember, and I'm sure you remember, when our kids were infants and babies and how exhausted and distracted we were all the time. I could completely see somebody making that tragic mistake. And I love the advice you just gave of taking a blanket or a stuffed bunny and putting it right in line of sight to remind you about this change. And that's, wow, I'm going to have to digest that a little bit, because that's, like you say, it makes my tummy hurt.
Yeah, oh yeah, it just makes me ill every time I read about. Then another quarter of them are caused by what you said, parents leaving the kids in the car to go in shopping. So if you see a kid in a car and you can tell the child is still alive, you can call 911. And if it looks like the kid is unresponsive, you can break the window and get the kid out.
And as parents ourselves, I mean, sometimes it's more of a hassle to go shopping. I know that when my kids were at certain ages, my shopping trip once a week that took an hour was one of the blessed stress-free vacations of my life. But they were home with their mom at that time. But just, this is another time where as parents, we bite the bullet and we take the kids in. It's the speed with which a car can become dangerously hot is so much lower than any of us estimate. And then you never know about if the line's going to be long. You don't know if you bump into an old friend in the store and get to talking and lose track of time. It's just one of those things that's 100% preventable if we just bring the kid in shopping with us.
Yeah, well, I when my kids were young, I left my youngest one in the car. She was asleep. I didn't want to take her out. It wasn't during the summer. It was during the winter, and it was cold. But I didn't want to wake her up. Just what you were talking about, the tired parent, because I was up all night, doing nightly feedings and all that. Yeah. So what happened was I got in the store and I was shopping, and I thought, well, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. So I looked for my car keys. I couldn't find my car keys. And I just panicked. So I went around the store to all the places where I'd been, and I'd found that I'd left the car keys. Here was all the grocery stuff, and here was some boxes or something, and I had left my keys there.
Oh man!
So boy, was that a big wake-up call. I never did that again, because I could see then, I thought, my gosh, I can't find my keys. I'm going to have to call the police, to break in my car. So anyway, that's a tragic thing that parents need to be aware of, because 50 deaths a year could be prevented with, like you said, people just biting the bullet and taking the kid into the store.
Yeah, we did not sign up to be parents because it was easy. And I absolutely, I feel it. I've made mistakes my own self, and that kind of mistake, because we are exhausted. You can't go to the bathroom undisturbed. Only a parent understands the concept of taking half a poop, right? But this is one of those situations where the margin for error is so much narrower than we think it is, that the best course of action is just take the kid in with you.
Yeah.
Now, the next one's kind of a list of bicycles, skateboards, scooters, all those tricycles, unicycles, all those kid vehicles that are so much fun, but I don't know anybody our age who doesn't have a, hey, you see this scar story regarding a bicycle or a skateboard? And of course, some of those do lead to much more serious injuries and fatalities. What are some of the best ways that we can avoid having our kids take that ER trip or worse, while still letting them play on their bicycles and skateboards?
Well, kids need to wear helmets. And I have twin grandkids who live in Madrid. And one way that my grandson, who's 16, is coping with the pandemic is riding a bike, instead of to get together with his friends, instead of going on the metro or the bus. And he won't wear a helmet. So he's 16. So it just breaks my heart, because according to research, only 45% of kids age 14 and under wear a bicycle helmet. So here's your brain. It's my best asset. Kids have to protect their brain. So whatever parents can do to get kids to wear a bicycle helmet, it's really important. And it's also recommended, if you are going on a skateboard, that you should wear knee pads and elbow pads. So,
what I encountered was the best way, apparently statistically, to get your kid to wear a bicycle helmet when they ride a bicycle. It's to wear a bicycle helmet when we're riding bicycles. Kids do imitate, they do learn from us. And if we take it seriously enough to put on our headgear, it's more likely that our kids will put on their own headgear. And that's just how it is. No matter how much freewheeling time we had as parents, riding without helmets, doing whatever.
Well, we were lucky. We were lucky, weren't we?
Yeah. And science has caught up, and they're not even that uncomfortable anymore.
Well, and brain damage is what you're trying to prevent.
Yeah. And then our final item on the list was attractive nuisances, we're calling them. Things like ATVs, fireworks. There's a whole bunch of stuff that is really cool, but really dangerous.
Yes, ATVs are very dangerous. Kids, it's a pediatrician recently recommended, he's involved with one of the safety groups, that kids under 16 not have ATVs. He said, look for some other, something else for them to do recreationally, because he said the machines are just too complicated for kids under 16. And I've seen kids in the parades here. We have parades out in our rural communities here, and I've seen kids 8, 10, 12 years old with, smaller sized machines made just for them. But the recommendation is to find something else for them to do until they get to be 16.
Okay. And again, that's one of those where we're parents. We want to make our kids happy. We want to see that joy on their face when they're lighting that firework when they're riding that ATV, they're swimming in the pool in the backyard. But also as parents, we have to balance that with our responsibility to keep them safe. And in some cases, it just means, buddy, the ATV and the marijuana and the Remington are for later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is kind of sad, but there it is. And of course, if for whatever reason that you come around to the decision that, yes, we're going to go ahead and be an ATV family, much like, yes, we're going to go ahead and be a family that has guns in the home, there are right ways and wrong ways to do that. And groups that exist to teach you the safety that is necessary to not make it safe, because those things won't be safe, but to make them safer.
Yes, well, it's all about being an informed, alert consumer.
Thank you for watching our show today. I hope you found something useful. If you have any questions about what you saw, please do leave them in the comments below. Myself, our guest, or our community will do our best to get those answers for you. If we don't know them ourselves, we will go find someone who knows them. If you loved us, please do hit the like button and the subscribe button. They make a bigger difference than you're thinking right now. And of course, go ahead and click on some of those videos YouTube is suggesting to you right now. We have a lot of stuff that we've worked hard on and are proud of, and hope that you'll enjoy them too. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.